Right. Just recently, Bungie adjusted Golden Gun Deadshot to refund the bullets on landing a kill, and each kill extends the duration of Goldie. So for the first time since ever, Gunslingers actually have a proper roaming super that they're incentivized to stay on. But it's the only super in the game where during it, you have every base ability accessible, which means during super, you can have full access to your build's effect if said build interacts with a class ability, grenade, or melee, which is a surprising amount of builds for Gunslinger. That's really the way to think about this super. Standalone, it doesn't do anything too crazy, but incorporate base abilities and this thing can put in some work. So this video, unlike my others, isn't a single build, rather everything I could think of that might be your fancy when YEEHAWing around the world of Destiny, specifically with Deadshot Goldie. Builds that make supers very quickly or have unique interactions with Goldie, and in some cases both. Before I delve into builds, ability descriptions, I don't want to have to repeat myself for every build here, so if you're familiar with all of this stuff, including recent buffs, the first build starts here. First up, Gunpowder Gamble, a throwable ignition which is charged up on weapon kills, ability kills, scorch and ignition kills, and super kills. You need 6 charges to get GPG charged, it's thrown like a grenade and goes on a 6-second cooldown after being thrown, where no kills will charge it up. Knock 'em down. Rim Radiant, throwing knife final blows refund themselves. Deadshot Goldie gets bonus damage resist totaling 66% DR with Knock 'em down equipped. On your mark, land precision kills, precision hits, or use a class ability to gain stacks of on your mark, which lasts for 12 seconds. Class ability and precision hits will give 1 stack, with precision kills giving 2 stacks. Each stack gives 5 weapon stats up to 50 at 10 stacks, and at 10, every kill you land will give you cure ×1, with no cooldown tied to how often you can trigger cure. Teammates will also receive the weapon stat bonuses from on your mark. For Goldie itself, it'll refund bullets and extend super timer for each final blow, but the returned energy will be diminishing. Your first kill will essentially give your entire super bar back, around 80%, with each kill afterwards dropping the amount of time, coming out to around 10% energy return per kill after you land a fair few kills with Deadshot. If you find yourself struggling on survivability with any of these builds, Red Death Reformed Ember of Empyrean is a consistent way to get restoration ×2, without having to always rely on healing grenade. Cool, we all good with that so far? First up, the knife focus build. Aspects are knock 'em down, on your mark, abilities are knife trick, healing grenade, gambler's dodge, supers Deadshot Goldie, fragments are Empyrean, ashes, torches, singeing, and the last is a flexible spot for solace, combustion, or char. Exotic armor is a Phidias Spath. Knife final blows give scissor fingers, a stacking melee damage buff, which stacks up to 3 times, with each stack giving a 66% knife damage increase. You can build up multiple stacks at once if you do a good job at fanning out the knives into separate enemies, as well as if you get kills with an ignition that had scorch applied by knife trick, that'll also give stacks. Ophidia has a unique interaction where if you land a kill with an ignition from scorch that was originally applied by knife trick, you'll have 2 charges refunded, and just in general, anytime you gain your first melee charge, you'll get your second back too. So gamblers within the melee stat range of 50 to 100 can refund 2 charges at once. 100 can be done at any time, 50 has to be near enemies. Data Compendium does list that precision kills supposedly refund 2 charges, but this was inconsistent when I was testing and not happening all that often. Same thing goes for getting multiple knife kills with 1 knife trick, I wouldn't always see 2 charges refunded. Just as long as you can get 1 knife kill, you know you'll always get at least 1 knife back, and in some cases 2. Wouldn't be a true Destiny build if it didn't come with a little side of spaghetti. Here's the mod setup. Armor set should be Despairing Souls 2-piece with DR on all pickup for 3 seconds. From there, go Despairing Souls 4-piece, Bushido 2-piece, Aeon Renewal 2-piece, or you can pivot away from DR entirely and just go pure healing with the Solstice 4-piece set for 35 HP on rapid solar kills, although Despairing Souls here is my preference. Stat priority should be super, melee, class, grenade. Again, the important stack breakpoint here being melee stat, which should never go below 50. But what we're actually doing here, and why it's so good alongside Deadshot, your knives are amazing at whittling down adds to then be mopped up with clean Goldie shots. You'll find yourself getting into a really natural gameplay loop of throw knife, Goldie, you just rinse and repeat that. This build really appreciates the DR given by Goldie too, and of the builds here, it's the most in your face and aggressive, so I find myself dragging out Deadshot for as long as possible to get that DR for as long as possible. Your knives at times through scissor fingers hit harder than Deadshot Goldie, so you can put out some seriously high, low risk damage, assuming you're chaining kills during super. What I think makes this build great is that it's actually got some decent survivability, which is a real first for Gunslinger. You'll have Cure from on your mark, with the nice interaction being that Deadshot Goldie will refund on your mark's timer on final blows, so do try to go into super with max on your mark stacks. Then restoration from healing grenade, recuperation orbs on melee final blows from heavy handed, then either extra DR from despairing souls, or just more healing through the solstice 4-piece bonus. It's a lot of healing and you can be surprisingly tanky, especially when all of that is paired up with your super. Goldie stuff aside, this build also has the added benefit of having a great neutral game. Your knives just by themselves are really lethal, and with heavy-handed, hands-on and siphons, you'll be making fast supers through melee final blows and orbs. It's got great unstop stun through ignitions and great anti-barrier through radiance. You actually can get quite aggressive with this build, as if you know that you're going to be able to get kills, and you can do that really easily with your knives, you'll be getting Cure and that keeps you in fights. Just be measured with that aggression. If something's going to one-shot you, no amount of healing will keep you alive, but you can be in the red, and a couple kills later, you'll be better full. Now, because your knives and super are so good at ad clear, you can start to run weapons that fill other niches too. One of my favourite loadouts with the build is New Land Beyond, deal with chunky bosses where I can't chain a Phidias damage bonus, and a bullet hose to build up quick on your mark stacks. Past that, there's a load of variation here and a lot of exotics to pick from. Something like Bastion shreds through healthy targets up close, plus it boosts your knife damage. Red Death could be good for getting restoration ×2 in the build, Conditional for its ability to apply freeze, which is overload stun, and make your knives hit extremely hard as frozen targets take bonus melee damage, and it can trigger ignitions, which can work well if Ember of Char is what you've run in that flexible last fragment spot. New Malpace is one that I've since used in the build and hits like an absolute truck against healthy targets. Some good perks to look out for are Proximity Power, Trench Barrel, 1-2 Punch, Demolitionist, Incandescent. This is also one of the few builds where I think Burning Ambition is quite good. If all 3 knives hit with Ashes, you'll apply 90 Scorch, and Burning Ambition on any gun will then apply 10 Scorch immediately, triggering an ignition. But the Scorch would have come from your knives, so you get all your Ophidius Faith bonuses if that ignition lands a kill. Again, this pairs up very well with Ember of Char. If you're all cool with that so far, let's go from melees to grenades. For aspects, you'll always want on your mark the Knock 'em Down or GPG. Abilities are Knife Trick, Trip Mine Grenade, Gambler's Dodge, Super's Deadshot Goldie. Fragments are Torches, Empyrean, Char, Ashes, Singeing. If you use Dragon's Breath in the build, switch Torches or Singeing for Mercy. My preference was to drop Torches. Exotic Armor is Young Ahankara's Spine, which adds 14% extra damage to Trip Mines, and Solar ability hits now refund 33% Trip Mine energy. But this ability refund stuff goes pretty deep. Your Trip Mine will count as 2 hits with a direct stick, so that is always a 66% refund, meaning most of the time you only need 1 more ability hit to get back another Trip Mine. Fan of Knives will count as 3 separate ability hits for each knife, so is a full Trip Mine refund by itself, and whenever you cause an ignition with Scorch that was originally applied from an ability, that counts as an ability hit and will give Trip Mine energy. Although, ignitions where weapons originally applied Scorch will not count as ability hits. Importantly, 1 ignition will only count as 1 ability hit, so only 33% ability energy, no matter how many targets that ignition hits. So GPG will only give 33% of a Trip Mine back when igniting, but sticking it to a target will also count as an ability hit, so with a stick and ignition, it gives 66% Trip Mine back. Now, one of the things you have to build around here is the lack of restoration through no healing grenade and not having restoration in Gunslinger's kits. It sucks that there isn't a way for hunters to get restoration through their kits like Warlocks and Titans, but it is what it is, and for the time being, all I can do for now is build around that. So, with Dragon's Breath, we use Mercy, which gives us restoration on picking up a Fire Sprite, Then Dragon's Breath Catalyst will spawn fire sprites on landing kills. It'll spawn maybe 4 or 5 fire sprites if sent into a group of adds. Then with Empyrean, we can chain Restoration as a way to get healing outside of Cure from on your mark. Red Death works too and is a bit simpler. You just land 2 kills, then you'll charge up the gun, and your next final blow will spawn an orb that gives you Restoration ×2, which again, you'll just extend with Empyrean. And at a stretch, you could go for a no hesitation with Physic to get Restoration, but this one's teammate dependent and I like being able to trigger Restoration independently. Here's my preferred mod setup, although arms can be switched with 2 grenade fonts and time dilation on the class to get an extra 40 grenade stats, with stat priority being grenade, super, class, melee. Armor set bonuses here are quite flexible. I'll go for either full solstice sets or combine any other good 2-piece bonus like Despairing Souls, Bushido, Trials, or Aeon Renewal 2-piece. I do just want to add that this build is focused on enabling Deadshot Goldie. The boss DPS rotations with this build should be done with Blade Barrage and with very different fragments and guns. This is more for your general roaming content like strikes, not DPS. Now, for almost identical reasons as Ophidia, this build is great as it's able to drop healthy targets low enough to the point where cleaning up with Goldie is really easy. The difference being that whilst Ophidia is all about throwing knives, this is all about throwing grenades and probably has the coolest interaction with Deadshot out of any build on this list. If you stick a trip mine and it blows up on that enemy, that's 66% back. But in Deadshot, as every bullet counts as an individual ability hit, you can throw trip mine, shoot Goldie, and have a full trip mine back, and loop that combo until your super runs dry, which gives you some ludicrous amounts of spam if you get Deadshot bullets refunded too. Again, much like Ophidia, you want to use abilities to whittle down the health of targets, then use Goldie to land the kill. You're mainly doing that through trip mines, but GPG has a unique interaction where super final blows fully charge it, so you'll also be able to work in gunpowder gambles basically off cooldown. For its neutral game, it's really good too and is a real bully when it comes to taking on single targets due to how many trip mines and ignitions you can stick on them, but also is great for ad clear as Ashes and Char can spread AoE around bunched up enemies really nicely, which will lead to moments where a lot of stuff just gets blown up as ads will spread ignitions to one another. It's also got some pretty good supergen through firepower and Ashes to assets. Again, much like the Ophidia build, because your abilities are so good at killing ads, you can be a bit more flexible with what style of guns you want to run here. Red Death and Dragon's Breath are nice for restoration, and a bullet hose style of gun for building on your mark stacks is nice, but after those you've got flexibility. For Aeon Renewal, you'll be a bit more locked into rocket frames or grenade launchers, but there's still quite a lot of flexibility in those. For perks on guns, I'll be looking out much more for specific perks like Blast Distributor, Incandescent, Burning Ambition, and Adrenaline Junkie. Right, I'm coming in post doing my first voiceover because I don't think I did enough justice to how good Burning Ambition can be with this build, in that by itself it can make an entire combo loop. You'll see a more basic version and then something much more likened to a damage rotation. You won't see the whole thing because it ended up taking me 3.5 minutes for me to fully run out of abilities and ammo, but you get the gist of it pretty quick. I'm getting ahead of myself though. What's actually going on here? You throw Trip Mine and apply 60 Scorch and add that last 40 Scorch through Burning Ambition, which then triggers an ignition. However, because that Scorch would be applied by Trip Mine, this also works for Knife Trick by the way, the ignition that gets triggered counts as an ability hit and will refund that last chunk of grenade energy as long as Scorch was first applied by an ability. So this isn't a free trip mine, it'll cost a little bit of time and ammo, but about as close as you could get to one. And when you're doing this, like what you've been seeing in the background, it becomes an entire combo just between a perk on a gun and a grenade. And I'm not gonna say this is beating any top DPS loadout, but the extended total damage that Burning Ambition trip mines can do is nothing to scoff at for how easy it is to pull off. Anyway, I know that's a lot for just one perk, but it's something I'd so encourage you to try. Back to me from the past. Okay, if that all sounds good, we're moving on to an absolute hidden gem of a homebrew build. This I think is the one that you definitely wouldn't have seen out and about, but one that I really hope catches your eye, because what it does is so unique, and it feels like not a soul has talked about it. So without further ado, the class ability build. This one doesn't do much in the way of changing Deadshot Goldie like how you work in knives and grenades with the two I've just covered, but it can spam supers extremely well and plays in a very unique way to where you don't need to play around on-kill effects, which is rare for Gunslinger. But the weapons you use here will quite drastically change how you run this build, almost to the point where these could be considered two separate builds just from the guns alone. So, your two loadouts are like so. The first will use Lord of Wolves and a charged bolt crossbow, with your kinetic being a flexible spot for anything else you want. This setup uses GPG, on your mark, abilities are knife trick, healing grenade, gambler's dodge, supers Deadshot Goldie, fragments are Empyrean, ashes, torches, char, combustion. The second loadout is Dragon's Breath, with an aerodenial frame grenade launcher, with either your energy or kinetic being a flexible spot for anything else. Aspects are knock 'em down, on your mark, abilities are weighted throwing knife, healing grenade, gambler's dodge, supers Deadshot Goldie, fragments are Empyrean, ashes, torches, char, combustion, with combustion being a flexible spot for mercy or solace. Across both builds, this is your mod setup. Stat priority needs to be high class stat and high weapon stat, although on your mark will give 50 weapon stat at 10 stacks, then for melee at least 50 for both builds, but I'd recommend trying to get 100 for the Dragon's Breath version, and a decent amount of super stat too. High class stat is most important though, as this is where our non-kill effect survivability comes from, and armor set bonuses can be sourced as 4-piece, or any combo of 2 good 2-piece bonuses like Bushido, Trials, Despairing Souls, or Aeon Renewal. Your exotic armor is Speedloader Slacks. Your dodge now reloads all your guns, and dodging gives you and allies Tight Fit, which is a stacking buff giving reload and handling bonuses, stacking up to 5 times, with each stack giving higher bonuses. Plus, when you deal direct, sustained weapon damage to a target while under the buff, you get class ability energy back for your dodge, around 20% per trigger of the perk. This second part of the exotic is the real attractive part of speedloaders, and the reason we have such big differences in our loadouts because of how they interact with this part specifically. The entire idea behind the build is obviously to make fast supers, but where the damage of these builds comes from is by using guns that can apply Scorch, then using a melee to top off that Scorch to trigger ignitions, using Gambler's Dodge given back by speedloaders to allow a really seamless loop of what I just said, apply Scorch, melee, ignition, dodge. That's the gameplay loop. But Lord of Wolves and Dragon's Breath do this in different ways due to how their damage is dealt, and with Dragon's Breath also taking up the heavy slot. Objectively, Lord of Wolves is the best gun in the game when it comes to class ability energy given back by speedloaders. The exotic works off sustained damage, and because Lord of Wolves fires in 5-round bursts and very quickly, the game recognises how much it hits as a lot of sustained damage, so immediately triggers class regen. On top of the fact that the Scorch the gun applies is considered as weapon damage and hits fast enough to count as sustained damage, so will also trigger class regen. Due to that, it makes it somewhat consistently give a full dodge back in 2 trigger pulls and guarantees a dodge in 3 trigger pulls, assuming you're landing all of your hits. Alongside Lord of Wolves, you always want to run a charged bolt crossbow, which you can't do with the Dragon's Breath version. It only takes 1 shot, you stow it away, and it'll start to passively give class energy back through its passive damage. It doesn't regen anywhere as quickly as Lord of Wolves, but it's a lot less commitment in that all you have to do is just fire a shot, stow the bow. Importantly though, the class energy that the crossbow and Lord of Wolves gives will be added up at the same time. There's no global counter for sustained weapon damage, rather each weapon is considered separate, which is good for you and me because that means a lot more regen from both guns triggering speedloaders simultaneously. So with crossbow and Lord of Wolves in hand, you can now get into this build's combo. Fire off a crossbow shot, then hit fire Lord of Wolves a couple times, aiming to build on your mark stacks and get Scorch on your targets. Then knife trick, which will trigger an ignition, dodge, crossbow, hit fire Lord of Wolves, knife trick, and rinse and repeat. Although, when doing this combo, never knife trick first. Lord of Wolves will be damage boosted by Radiant through torches, and as it would be what applies Scorch in the first place, that ignition will be damage boosted by 20%, so never knife first, always hit fire. But this whole combo not only can go on for a long time due to how ammo efficient it is, but it bundles in lots of ignitions, lots of overshields from high class stats, loads of super energy from dynamo distribution, and radiant damage boosted weapons. The combo can only really be done on healthy targets, but that's where GPG, Char, Ashes, Knife Trick can be really nice for spreading around AoE. Now imagine everything I've just talked about, but we take these off and add these in. And instead of throwing 3 knives, we now throw 1. This build, whilst it's not as efficient at building supers as it can't compete with the class regen Lord of Wolves gives, it lets you do your combos from a further distance and has a very high total damage. The idea is that we're using weighted knife to trigger ignitions from the scorch that Dragon's Breath applies. Although Dragon's Breath isn't efficient at giving speedloaders regen, it doesn't hit enough, which is why an Era Denial is needed here. These hit loads are more than cover for Dragon's Breath lack of hits, so your combo will go Dragon's Breath, weighted knife, Era Denial, dodge, weighted knife, Era Denial. And depending on if the enemy still has Scorch on them, you're either weighted knife again. If the enemy isn't scorched, fire off another Dragon's Breath and loop that combo. Same as before, this will give you loads of overshields, loads of super through dynamo distribution, and a lot of ignitions from weighted knife and Dragon's Breath. With this version though, your knives will be refunding on final blows through knock 'em down, and as your knives also refund your dodge on precision kills, you can use this as a way to get around always having to rely on dealing sustained damage. Plus with combustion and char, during super you'll also have a way to reliably trigger ignitions. With this build too, I'd really recommend a good bullet hose, so that in the middle of your combo you can build up on your mark stacks. Again, this is a combo that'll only really work on those healthier enemies, so relying on incandescent weighted will be your go-to for AoE and triggering ignition chains. Whilst the weapons in these 2 variations of the build will be fixed to Lord of Wolves crossbow for the first, and Dragon's Breath Era Denial for the second, you should keep an eye out on Burning Ambition, Incandescent, Demolitionist, and Attrition Orbs. Right, originally this segment was going to be talking about Star Eater scales, but the more I played with it and tested with it, the more I came to think that it's a little bit of a bait pick. Its damage buff, which is the whole reason you'd really use the exotic, only lasts 14 seconds, which goes against the whole idea of what Deadshot is supposed to do, which is lasting a long time. The moment that damage buff fell off, it felt like the build lost its whole appeal. If I wanted super spam, speedloaders did it better. If I wanted really high damage supers, it was young Ahamkaras that felt more consistent. If I wanted a great neutral game, using Deadshot to let me tank loads of damage whilst flinging out knives, Ophidia did it best all the way. The biggest sin of the Star Eater build though, was that it didn't feel fun. And I've got a little promise with myself that if it isn't fun, it never makes its way onto the channel. So for the time being, the Star Eater build is canned. Anyway, on a slightly more positive note, the seasonal artifact at the minute is great for all these builds. If it's not Ash and Iron, you can skip ahead, but for future artifacts, you're really just looking for anything with solar interactions or synergy. For the time being though, take Fever and Chill, Elemental Benevolence, Cauterized Darkness, Elemental Daze, Elemental Coalescence, Radiant Shrapnel, and Shield Crush. And that makes the list. I hope you enjoy these builds. Deadshot Goldie has been so fun to mess around with, and its ability to just slay out when there's ads around has stuck it up there for being probably the most fun super in the game. For me. So I hope these builds let you enjoy as much as I've been, but that's about it from me. See ya!